"Don't touch that," the waitress cried. The Mafia boss froze when he saw what she hid. The rain in Harborview never felt like water. It felt like liquid regret, cold and relentless, slicking the asphalt of the decaying streets until they shone like black mirrors under the sputtering neon lights. It was 3 a.m, the hour when the city stopped pretending to be civilized and settled into its true, gritty nature. Inside the harbor diner, the air smelled of stale coffee, frying bacon, and damp wool. It was a 24-hour sanctuary for the insomniacs, the long-haul truckers with bloodshot eyes, and the men in sharp suits who had no business being in a place with cracked vinyl booths unless they were discussing things that could not be said in daylight. Lily Hart wiped down the counter with a rag that had seen better days, her movements efficient, rhythmic, and visibly exhausted. Every muscle in her legs ached from the double shift. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours, fueled only by caffeine and a terrified determination that sat in her stomach like a stone. She paused near the register to count her tips. $18. It was not enough. It was never enough. She smoothed the crumpled bills and tucked them into her apron pocket, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of a locker key. In her mind, she could see the inside of that locker in the back room. Taped to the inside of the door was a photograph, worn at the edges. It showed a smiling man with kind eyes, Mark, and a little girl with chaotic curls sitting on his shoulders, Emma. Mark was gone, buried in a closed casket 3 years ago after a warehouse fire that the police called an accident and Lily called a massacre. Emma was 7 years old now, asleep in their drafty apartment, depending on Lily to keep the wolves at the door. Lily took a deep breath and looked down at her feet. Under the counter, wedged between a box of napkins and the safe, was a charcoal gray backpack. It was nondescript, frayed at the straps, the kind of bag you could buy at a discount store for $10. But Lily checked its position every time she walked past. She nudged it with her sneaker, ensuring it was touching the wall. It contained her life, or rather, the insurance policy for her life. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt jarring in the heavy silence. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. It was a physical change, like the air pressure dropping before a tornado touches down. Conversation at the trucker tables died. The cook in the back stopped scraping the grill. Dante Moretti walked in. He did not look like he belonged in Harborview's rot, yet everyone knew he owned it. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Lily made in a year, tailored to fit broad shoulders and a lean, powerful frame. His face was a study in cold, aristocratic angles, high cheekbones, a sharp jaw, and eyes the color of espresso, dark and unreadable. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and commanding. 2 men flanked him. They were the size of refrigerators, their jackets bulging slightly at the waist, their eyes scanning the room for threats. Lily stiffened. She knew who he was. Everyone knew the Moretti name. It was plastered on construction sites, waste management trucks, and charitable foundations, but it was written in blood on the streets. This was the family that had ordered the fire. This was the family that had taken Mark. She forced her hands to stop shaking. She could not afford fear. Fear made you clumsy, and clumsiness got you killed. Dante ignored the hush he had created. He pointed to a booth in Lily's section, the one with the best view of the door and the street. His bodyguards took up positions at the counter, their backs to him, effectively creating a wall of muscle between the boss and the rest of the world. Lily grabbed a pot of fresh coffee and a mug. She walked over, her face a mask of clipped, professional politeness. "Coffee," she said. It was not a question. Dante looked up. He did not smile. He simply studied her, his gaze dissecting her in a way that made her skin prickle. He took in the shadows under her eyes, the fraying collar of her uniform, the way she held the pot with a white-knuckled grip. "Black," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth as velvet dragged over gravel. She poured. He watched the dark liquid fill the mug, then lifted it to his lips. Taking a slow sip, he grimaced slightly. "You are trying to poison me," he remarked calmly, setting the mug down. "This is burnt." Lily did not flinch. She had dealt with worse than complaints about the roast. It is 3 in the morning at a roadside diner. Mr. Moretti, we do not serve artisan blends. You drink it for the caffeine, not the flavor. One of the bodyguards at the counter turned his head, looking scandalized that a waitress would speak back to the heir of the syndicate. Dante, however, looked amused. A flicker of interest sparked in his dark eyes. You know my name. Hard not to, Lily replied, pulling a notepad from her apron. Do you want food, or are you just here to critique the beverage selection? Just the coffee, he said, leaning back against the vinyl, and perhaps a glass of water, to rinse the taste of burnt beans out of my mouth. Coming right up, she turned on her heel, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab the backpack and flee out the back door, but she could not. Running made you look guilty. Staying made you invisible. Throughout the next hour, Dante did not leave. He sat there, checking messages on a sleek phone, occasionally glancing up to watch the room. He watched her, too. Lily felt his gaze following her as she bussed tables. She tried to ignore it, but it was heavy, weighted with intelligence. He was not looking at her legs or her face like the other men did. He was watching her hands. A cook dropped a heavy metal pan in the kitchen. The crash sounded like a gunshot. Lily flinched violently, her shoulders jerking up, her hand flying to her chest. It was a reflex she had never been able to break since the night of the warehouse. She recovered quickly, smoothing her apron. But when she looked toward booth 4, Dante was watching her. He was not looking at the kitchen. He was looking at her trembling hands. His eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. He knew fear when he saw it, and he knew trauma. Lily walked back to refill his water, refusing to acknowledge the moment. You are jumpy, Dante observed quietly. Loud noises, Lily said, her voice flat. Hazards of the trade. Is that so? Dante took a sip of water. I would think a waitress in this part of town would be used to a little noise. I like a quiet life, she retorted. Nobody in Harborview has a quiet life, Dante said. We just have loud silences. It was a strange thing to say. Lily looked at him, really looked at him. For a second, he looked tired. Beneath the expensive suit and the aura of danger, there were lines of exhaustion around his eyes that mirrored her own. But she crushed the moment of empathy instantly. He was a Moretti. He was the enemy. The night wore on. The rain intensified, drumming against the plate glass windows like 1,000 fingers tapping for entry. By 4 in the morning, the diner had emptied out, leaving only Dante, his shadows, and a solitary drunk man at the counter who had been nursing a whiskey he had snuck in from a flask. The drunk, a burly man in a grease-stained jacket, waved his empty mug at Lily. Hey, dollface. More Joe. Lily walked over, the pot in her hand. The name is Lily, and you have had enough. Earl, you need to go home. I ain't going nowhere. Earl slurred. He reached out, his hand clammy and rough, and grabbed Lily's wrist. You think you're better than me, huh? Let go, Lily said, her voice tight. She tried to pull back, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Come on, sweetheart. Earl leered, pulling her closer. Just one smile. I said let go, Lily snapped, raising the coffee pot as a weapon. Before she could swing, a shadow fell over them. Dante was there. He had moved so silently she had not heard him leave the booth. He did not shout. He did not posture. He simply leaned in close to Earl's ear, his hand resting lightly on the counter. Stop touching the staff, Dante said. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a man who did not need to make threats because he was the threat. Let her go. Now. Earl looked up, bleary-eyed. Recognition dawned slowly. Cutting through the alcohol fog, he saw the cold, dead eyes of Dante Moretti, and the color drained from his face. He released Lily's wrist as if it were red-hot iron. Mr. Moretti, Earl stammered, scrambling off the stool. I didn't see you. Just having fun. No harm done. Leave, Dante said. One word. Simple. Final. Earl stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet, and fled out the door into the rain. Lily stood there, rubbing her wrist where red finger marks were already forming. Her heart was racing, not from Earl, but from the man standing 2 feet away from her. Dante turned to her. The coldness in his eyes thawed slightly, replaced by a strange concern. "Are you all right?" Lily stepped back, putting distance between them. "I was handling it." Dante raised an eyebrow. "It looked like he was handling you." "I did not ask for your help," Lily said, her pride flaring. She hated that he had seen her vulnerable. She hated that he had stepped in like a white knight when his family was the dragon. "I do not need a mob prince to rescue me." The bodyguards by the door tensed, stepping forward, but Dante held up a hand to stop them. A faint smile touched his lips. "Mob prince," he repeated. "That is a new one. Usually, people just call me sir or look at the floor." "I'm not most people," Lily said, turning back to the counter to put the coffee pot away. "And I don't bow." "I can see that," Dante murmured. He turned to go back to his booth to collect his coat. "Keep the change on the table." Lily watched him walk away. She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She moved to the section of the counter where her backpack sat, needing the reassurance of its weight. She began to wipe down the surface, her movements agitated. Outside, a city bus roared past. It hit a pothole right in front of the diner, a massive, shuddering impact that vibrated through the foundation of the building. The windows rattled in their frames. The vibration shook the shelving under the counter. In slow motion, Lily watched as her backpack tipped over the edge. It hit the linoleum floor with a heavy, metallic thud that sounded entirely wrong for a bag supposed to contain a change of clothes and a library book. The zipper, which was old and temperamental, split open upon impact. "Damn it," Lily hissed. Dante was walking past the counter on his way to the door. He was 5 feet away. At the sound of the heavy thud, he stopped and instinctively turned. He saw the bag on the floor, spilling its contents. "Allow me," he said, his manners automatic. He bent down in a smooth crouch, his hand reaching out to gather the spilled items. Panic, white-hot and blinding, exploded in Lily's chest. "Don't touch that!" she cried out. Her voice cracked like a whip, sharp and desperate. She lunged over the counter, abandoning all dignity, scrambling to get between him and the bag. But she was too late. Dante's hand had already brushed aside a scarf. The bag's main compartment gaped open. There, nestled against a worn paperback novel, was a gun. It was not a cheap street piece. It was a vintage, compact semi-automatic, gleaming with silver plating, but it was the grip that mattered. The grip was custom ivory, intricately engraved with a crest, a roaring lion entangled with vines, and below the crest, 2 letters were etched in elegant, flowing script, L.M. Dante froze. His hand hovered inches from the weapon. The world seemed to stop spinning. The sounds of the rain and the refrigerator hum vanished. He knew that gun. He knew the weight of it. He knew the scratch on the barrel. He knew the crest because it was tattooed on his own shoulder. And he knew the initials. Luca Moretti, his brother. His dead brother. Dante's face went rigid. The polite, bored mask he wore for the world shattered. His eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide with shock, the narrowing into a look of haunted, piercing intensity. He stared at the weapon as if he were seeing a ghost. Lily slammed her hand down on the bag, grabbing the fabric and ripping it away from him. She shoved the gun back inside and zipped it shut with trembling fingers, clutching the backpack to her chest like a shield. She backed up until she hit the cupboards, her breathing coming in shallow. Ragged gasps. Dante stayed in his crouch for a second longer, his hand still extended into empty air. Then, slowly, terrifyingly slowly, he rose to his full height. He looked at the bag in her arms. Then he looked at her face. The air between them crackled with voltage. It was thick with danger. The bodyguards, sensing the shift, had their hands inside their jackets, eyes locked on Lily. Dante waved them down with a sharp, minute flick of his fingers. He did not look away from Lily. "That is a very distinct piece of hardware for a waitress," Dante said. His voice was soft, but the velvet was gone. It was all gravel now. "Where did you get it?" Lily's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She could not tell him the truth. She could not tell him she took it from the warehouse floor the night his family slaughtered everyone she loved. She could not tell him it was the gun that had killed Mark. She lifted her chin, fighting to keep her voice steady. "It is a dangerous city," she lied. "A girl needs protection. I bought it at a pawn shop in the East End." It was a terrible lie. A gun like that never ended up in a pawn shop. A gun like that was an heirloom. Dante stared at her. He knew she was lying. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, a muscle feathering near his ear. His gaze dropped to the bag again, as if he could see through the canvas, then back to her eyes. He was searching for something. Recognition. Guilt. A name. "A pawn shop," he repeated flatly. "Yes," Lily said. "Is that a crime?" "Possession of unregistered firearms is," Dante said. "But that is not what concerns me." He took a step closer. Lily pressed herself harder against the cupboards. She was trapped. If he ordered his men to take the bag, she could not stop them. She would lose the gun. And worse, she would lose the flash drive hidden in the lining, the video evidence that proved everything. But Dante did not order his men to attack. He just stood there, staring at her with that haunted, intense expression, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle that terrified him. "Be careful, Lily," he said softly. The use of her name sounded intimate and threatening all at once. "Some things are too heavy to carry. They drag you down to the bottom." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. It felt like an eternity. Then, the mask slid back into place. The shock vanished, buried under layers of iron control. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a money clip, and peeled off a crisp bill. "For your trouble," he said, placing $100 on the counter. He turned and walked out into the rain without looking back. His bodyguards followed, casting suspicious glances at Lily as they exited. The door swung shut, the bell chiming cheerfully, mocking the tension in the room. Lily stood frozen until the taillights of his black sedan disappeared around the corner. Only then did her legs give out. She sank onto the floor behind the counter, curling into a ball in the narrow space. She hugged the backpack so tightly her arms ached. "Oh, God," she whispered into the silence. She unzipped the bag just an inch, reaching past the gun into a small, torn seam in the inner lining. Her fingers brushed the cool plastic of a USB drive. It was still there. He had seen the gun. He recognized it. She had seen the ghost in his eyes. He knew. She was not just a waitress to him anymore. She was a loose end. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, forcing the panic down, locking it away just like she locked away the grief. She thought of Emma sleeping safely in her bed. She thought of Mark's face in the photo. "I cannot fall apart now," she hissed to herself. "Not now." She stood up, her knees shaking but holding her weight. She zipped the bag shut, threw the strap over her shoulder, and walked to the door to flip the sign to closed. The war had just started. And the enemy knew where she worked. The silence in Dante Moretti's office was not peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submarine deep underwater. The room sat perched above one of the family's shipping warehouses, a sleek box of glass and steel overlooking the grimy industrial sprawl of Harborview's docklands. Dante sat behind a desk that cost more than most people in this city earned in a decade, but his attention was focused on something worthless to anyone else. A 4x6 photograph, creased at the corner. It was an old picture of his brother, Luca. Luca had been the wild one, the loud one, the one who laughed with his whole body. In the photo, Luca was grinning, holding a compact silver handgun with a custom ivory grip. The Moretti lion crest was clearly visible, even in the grain of the film. Dante ran his thumb over the image of the gun. It was the same weapon. There was no mistake. He had seen it in the waitress's bag, the same engraving, the same initials. Luca had died 3 years ago, gunned down in an ambush that had never been fully solved. The family had assumed the gun was stolen by his killers as a trophy. So why was it in the backpack of a terrified waitress at the Harbor Diner? The office door opened. Marco Vieri walked in. Marco was Dante's right hand, a man who moved with the quiet efficiency of a shadow. He held a manila folder. "You have news," Dante said, not looking up from the photo. "I have a life story," Marco replied, placing the folder on the polished ebony desk. "Her name is Lily Hart, 26 years old." Dante opened the folder. A copy of a driver's license photo stared back at him. Lily looked younger in the picture, less tired, her eyes bright with an optimism that had been thoroughly extinguished by the time he met her last night. "Clean record," Marco recited, clasping his hands behind his back. "No arrests, no parking tickets. She's struggling, though, drowning in debt. She works double shifts at the diner to pay rent on a fourth-floor walk-up in the East End." "Family?" Dante asked. "A sister? Deceased? Overdose?" "Lily has custody of the niece. A girl named Emma, 7 years old." Dante's fingers tightened on the edge of the folder. A guardian. That explained the desperation he had sensed in her, the feral protectiveness over that backpack. She was not just surviving for herself. "And the boyfriend?" Dante asked. "There is always a man." "There was," Marco corrected. "Mark Evans. He died 3 years ago." Dante looked up, his eyes narrowing. 3 years ago?" "Yes," Marco nodded. "Official cause of death was smoke inhalation and thermal injuries. He was a night watchman at a warehouse in the district. He was caught in that massive fire at the West Side Distribution Center. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante went very still. The West Side Fire. It was a cover story. Everyone in the underworld knew that. It had been a massacre, a purging of a rival faction that had tried to encroach on Moretti territory. His father, Tomas, had ordered it. Luca had led the team. That was the night Luca had died, caught in the crossfire before the building burned. Mark Evans. Dante repeated the name, tasting the ash of the memory. "An innocent bystander?" "Collateral damage," Marco said, his voice void of sentiment. "He was just working the wrong shift at the wrong time." Dante closed the folder slowly. The pieces clicked together with the sickening precision of a loaded weapon. Lily Hart was not just a waitress with a stolen gun. She was the fiancée of a man his family had murdered, and she was walking around with the weapon that had belonged to the man who led the slaughter. "Keep digging," Dante ordered, his voice low. "I want to know who she talks to. I want to know where she goes, but do not touch her. If she catches wind that we are watching, she might bolt." "Understood," Marco said. He paused at the door. "Dante, if she has the gun, she might know something about how Luca died. If she knows—" "I will handle it," Dante cut him off. "Go." Across the city, sunlight struggled to push through the grime of Lily Hart's bedroom window. The apartment was small, a cramped one-bedroom unit where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. But it was clean. Lily made sure of that. "Aunt Lily, I cannot find my other shoe." Lily shook off the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. She forced a smile onto her face, her armor for the day, and walked into the living room, which doubled as Emma's bedroom. "It is under the couch." "Bug," Lily said, her voice light and teasing. "Where you kicked it last night when you were pretending to be a ninja." Emma, a small girl with chaotic hair and eyes that were painfully similar to her mother's, dove under the thrift store sofa and emerged triumphant with a scuffed sneaker. "Got it!" Lily grabbed a brush and sat Emma down between her knees. Her hands, usually steady when she was not terrified, moved deftly through the child's hair, weaving a neat braid. This was the only part of the day that felt pure. The smell of Emma's strawberry shampoo, the morning cartoons playing softly, the illusion that they were a normal family. "Field trip is today," Emma chirped. "Do not forget to sign the form." "I signed it last night," Lily said, tying off the braid with a pink elastic. She kissed the top of Emma's head. "Now go. Mrs. Geller is waiting downstairs to walk you to the bus." After Emma left, the apartment fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. The mask of the cheerful aunt dissolved. Lily's shoulders slumped. She walked to the door, locked it, engaged the deadbolt, and then wedged a chair under the handle. She went to the kitchen, where the loose floorboard under the sink was hidden by a rug. She pried it up and pulled out the backpack. She carried it to the small, scarred kitchen table and took out the gun. She set it down carefully. hating the heavy thud it made against the wood. Then she took out the flash drive. She booted up her laptop. It was an old machine, the fan whirring loudly as it struggled to come to life. She plugged in the drive. She did not need to watch the video. She'd seen it 100 times. It played on a loop in her nightmares. But she needed to remember why she was tired. She needed to remember why she could not just throw the gun in the river and leave this city. She clicked the file. The footage was grainy, shot from a cell phone that had been propped up behind a stack of crates. There was no sound at first, just the visual chaos of men in masks storming the warehouse floor. Then, the audio kicked in, a distorted, terrifying cacophony of shouting and gunfire. Lily watched, her hands gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. She saw Mark. He was on his knees, his hands raised. He was shouting her name, begging them to let him go, screaming that he hadn't seen anything. Then a man stepped into the frame. He was not wearing a mask. He was young, handsome in a cruel way. He held a silver gun with an ivory grip. He laughed. Lily could see his shoulders shake with it before he raised the weapon. Lily closed her eyes as the shot fired, but she could still hear it. When she opened them again, the video showed the aftermath, the chaos, the fire starting, and then the shooter falling, hit by a stray bullet from the dark, the gun sliding across the concrete floor, spinning until it stopped near the crates where Lily had been hiding, trembling and pressing her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. She paused the video on the frame where the gun lay on the floor. The crest was visible. Lily reached for a stack of index cards pinned to a corkboard on the wall. The board was a map of her obsession. Newspaper clippings about the fire. Photos of Moretti family members she had surreptitiously taken or found online. She picked up a pen and wrote on a new card. Dante Moretti. Saw the gun. Recognized it. Danger level. Critical. "Why did you have to come in?" she whispered to the empty room. She looked at the sticky note in the center of the board. Who ordered the hit? Who benefits? She knew the Morettis were behind it, but she needed proof of who gave the order. The video showed the shooter, but it didn't show the boss. It didn't show the chain of command, and without that, the police would just bury it. She remembered the detective she had tried to talk to a month after the fire. He had looked at her with cold, flat eyes and told her the case was closed. Accidental electrical fire. Miss Hart, let it go. Later. She saw him shaking hands with a man in a Moretti construction truck. "No police," she murmured, wiping a tear that had escaped. "Not until I have them all. Not until I can burn them down so fast they cannot bribe their way out." She unplugged the drive, wrapped it in a soft cloth, and tucked it back into the lining of the bag. She checked the safety on the gun and placed it back in its compartment. She had to go to work. She had to smile. She had to serve coffee to the monsters. The diner was quieter that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black under the streetlights. Lily was refilling the sugar dispensers when the bell chimed. She didn't look up immediately, but her pulse jumped in her throat. She knew who it was. She could feel the change in the air, the sudden heavy gravity that entered the room with him. Dante Moretti was alone. No bodyguards, no wall of muscle. Just him, wearing a black leather jacket over a dark sweater, looking less like a crime lord and more like a man who had nowhere else to be. He didn't sit in the back. He took a booth right in her section. Lily forced herself to breathe. She walked over, clutching her notepad like a shield. "You are back," she said, keeping her voice flat. "Did you come to complain about the coffee again?" Dante looked up. The harsh diner lighting should have made him look washed out, but instead, it just highlighted the sharp angles of his face. His expression was softer tonight, less guarded. "I actually came to apologize," he said. Lily blinked, thrown off balance. "Apologize? For last night," Dante said. "For interfering with the drunk. It was not my place to step in. You looked like you had the situation under control." Lily stared at him. She had expected threats. She had expected him to demand the bag. She had not expected an apology. "I did have it under control," she said, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "But thank you for getting him to leave. He will not bother you again." Dante said simply. The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. She decided not to ask what that meant. Coffee, she asked, falling back on the routine. Please, and maybe something that does not taste like charcoal this time. No promises. She brought the pot. As she poured, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the bruise on her wrist where Earl had grabbed her the night before. It was a dark, ugly purple against her pale skin. Dante's eyes locked onto it. His gaze was intense, physical. Lily felt the heat of it. "He hurt you," Dante said. It wasn't a question. His voice had dropped an octave, rumbling with a suppressed anger that surprised her. Lily tugged her sleeve down quickly. "It is fine. Just a bruise. I have had worse." "You should not have to have worse," Dante said. He looked at her, really looked at her, searching her face. "Why do you work here, Lily? You are smart. You are sharp. You could do better than serving swill to truckers at midnight." "Rent does not pay itself," Lily said, putting the pot down on the table with a clink. "And unlike some people, I do not have a family empire to fall back on." Dante let out a short, dry laugh. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The movement brought him into her personal space, smelling of rain and expensive tobacco. "If I owned this place," he said, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners, "I would burn the coffee maker first, and then I would make sure you did not have to work 2 shifts in one day." "If you owned the place," Lily countered, fighting the sudden flutter in her stomach, "you would probably just turn it into a front for something illegal." Dante chuckled. It was a genuine sound, warm and rusty, like he hadn't used it in a long time. "Touché." He watched her as she worked through the next hour. The diner was empty enough that they could talk, and against her better judgment, Lily found herself answering him. He was observant, unnervingly so. "You have calluses on your fingers," he noted when she set down a plate of fries. "Guitar." "Piano," Lily said, surprised. "I used to play a long time ago." "Why did you stop?" "Life got loud," she said, looking away. "Sold the piano to pay a lawyer." "A lawyer for what?" "For a mistake," she said, closing the subject. He noticed the faint white scar on her temple, hidden near her hairline. He noticed the way she favored her left leg when she was tired, and she, in turn, began to notice things about him. She saw the way his shoulders slumped when he thought she wasn't looking. She saw the way he rubbed his temple, as if he had a permanent headache. She saw that his hands, though manicured and deadly, looked weary. "You look tired, Mr. Moretti," she said, pausing at his table with the check. "Dante," he corrected, "and I am tired. Lily, it is exhausting trying to keep a city from eating itself. Maybe you should let it eat," Lily said softly. "Maybe it deserves to." Dante looked at her, his expression darkening with a mixture of regret and fascination. "Maybe, but my family lives in the belly of the beast. If it starves, we starve." "Must be nice to have a family that watches your back," Lily said, bitterness creeping into her tone. "They watch my back," Dante murmured, "mostly to see where to stick the knife." The vulnerability in his voice stunned her. For a moment, he wasn't the enemy. He was just a man trapped in a cage of his own making. "I should go," Dante said abruptly, sliding out of the booth. He stood up. The aisle between the booths was narrow. Lily was standing there, blocking his path. She moved to step aside, but he moved the same way. They collided, not hard, but enough. Their bodies brushed. Lily felt the solid, warm wall of his chest against her shoulder. Dante's hand came up instinctively to steady her, his fingers curling around her elbow. The touch was electric. It zipped through Lily's nerves, hot and startling. She froze. Dante froze. He didn't let go. He stood there, looming over her, his heat radiating through her thin uniform. He was close, too close. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She could feel his breath, warm and steady, stirring the hair near her ear. Time seemed to suspend. The hum of the refrigerator faded. The neon sign buzzing in the window vanished. There was only the pressure of his hand on her arm and the scent of him filling her lungs. Dante's gaze dropped. It traveled from her eyes down to her mouth. His pupils dilated, his jaw tightened, the muscle jumping as he clenched his teeth. He looked like a man fighting a war against his own instincts. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She should pull away. She should slap him. He was a Moretti. He was the reason Mark was dead. But she didn't move. Her lips parted slightly. A treacherous, unconscious invitation. Dante leaned in, just an inch. The air between them crackled, heavy with the promise of something dangerous and forbidden. Then he stopped. He squeezed her elbow once, firmly, and then released her as if she burned him. He stepped back, the mask slamming back into place, though his eyes were still dark with turbulence. "Good night, Lily," he said, his voice rough. He brushed past her and walked out the door, the bell chiming a frantic farewell. Lily stood rooted in the aisle. Her skin where he had touched her felt branded. Her breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. She touched her lips, her fingers trembling. "Damn you," she whispered, furious at the tears pricking her eyes. "Damn you." Outside, the air was cool and damp. Dante stopped under the flickering neon sign of the diner. He fumbled for his silver cigarette case, his hands shaking slightly. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it, the flame illuminating the hard lines of his face. He took a drag, the smoke burning his lungs, grounding him. He looked back through the window. He could see Lily standing where he had left her, looking lost and fierce all at once. He had gone in there to investigate a threat. He had gone in there to figure out if she was an enemy, but all he could think about was the way she had looked at him when he held her arm. She hadn't looked at him with fear. She hadn't looked at him with the sycophantic adoration he was used to. She had looked at him like he was a man. "You are a problem, Lily Hart," Dante murmured to the night, exhaling a plume of gray smoke. He dropped the unfinished cigarette to the wet pavement and crushed it under the heel of his expensive Italian shoe. He wasn't worried about the gun anymore. He was worried about the fact that for the first time in years, he didn't want to destroy the person holding it. He walked to his car, the darkness of the city swallowing him whole, leaving the light of the diner behind him, like a beacon he knew he should not follow, but knew he would. The night air in Harborview was thick enough to taste, a heavy soup of salt spray and diesel fumes that clung to the back of the throat. Lily Hart walked fast, her sneakers slapping against the damp pavement in a rhythm that matched the anxious thrumming of her heart. It was 2 a.m. The shift at the diner had been brutal, a parade of demanding customers and spilled drinks that had left her muscles tight and her mind frayed. She gripped the strap of her backpack with white-knuckled force. It was heavier than usual, or perhaps it was just the weight of what was inside, the flash drive, the gun, the secrets that could get her killed, that seemed to drag her down. A pair of headlights swept across the brickwork of the alley ahead, stretching her shadow into a long, distorted shape. Lily froze. She did not turn around. She listened. The hum of an engine rolled slowly down the block. It was not the aggressive rev of a street racer or the rattle of a delivery truck. It was the low, predatory purr of a luxury sedan moving at a crawl. She knew that sound, or at least her paranoia told her she did. Without breaking stride, Lily ducked into a narrow side street, cutting through a gap in the chain-link fence that locals used as a shortcut. She moved quickly, navigating the maze of dumpsters and fire escapes, her breath hitching in her chest. She did not stop until she was 3 streets over, taking the long, winding route toward her apartment building. She told herself she was being ridiculous. She told herself she was just tired. But 3 blocks back, idling in the shadows of an underpass, Dante Moretti watched her go. He gripped the steering wheel of his black coupe, his knuckles pale against the leather. He'd been following her for 20 minutes, keeping a distance that bordered on professional negligence. He should have been closer, or he should have been nowhere near her at all. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Marco. Dante ignored it. Marco had been digging, and when Marco dug, he displaced earth, and things that were buried tended to get exposed. Dante had seen the reports Marco was compiling, the timeline of the warehouse fire, the connection to Lily's fiancé, but there was something else. a restlessness in the organization, whispers of men moving without orders. Dante shifted gears, easing the car forward. He was not here to hurt her. He told himself he was here to see who else was watching. Lily's apartment building was a crumbling brownstone that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, her legs burning, desperate for the safety of her lock and deadbolt. She reached the landing and stopped dead. The hallway light flickered, casting a strobe-like glow on her front door. It was ajar, just an inch. A sliver of darkness visible between the frame and the wood. But to Lily, it looked like a gaping maw. Ice flooded her veins. She stood paralyzed, her hand hovering over her keys. She thought of Emma. Then she remembered, with a rush of dizzying relief, that Emma was at a sleepover with her best friend from school. The apartment was empty, or it should have been. Panic, sharp and immediate, replaced the relief, the backpack. Lily pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. It was a stupid thing to do, but instinct drove her. The apartment was a wreck. It looked as though a hurricane had been trapped inside the small living room. The sofa cushions were slashed, white stuffing bleeding out onto the rug. The drawers of her small desk were pulled out and overturned, papers scattered like confetti. The television was smashed. It was not a robbery. Robbers took things. This was a search. Lily ignored the destruction. She sprinted to the kitchen, dropping to her knees in front of the sink. She shoved the ragged rug aside and pried at the loose floorboard with her fingernails. Snapping one in the process, she lifted the wood. The hollow space underneath was empty. No, wait. She shoved her hand deeper, feeling around in the darkness. Her fingers brushed canvas. She let out a sob of relief. She had pushed it far back last night, deeper than usual. She dragged the spare backpack out, the decoy bag she kept there, and realized with a jolt of horror that she was holding the wrong thing. She was wearing the real backpack. The gun and the drive were on her back. She had never taken them out. She scrambled to her feet, turning to run, but the air in the kitchen suddenly shifted. 2 men stepped out from the shadows of the utility closet. They were dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, wearing ski masks that obliterated their features. They were big, blocking the exit to the hallway. Lily stumbled back, her hip hitting the counter. "She has it on her," one of the men said. His voice was muffled, gravelly. "Smart girl," the other one sneered. He took a step forward, holding out a gloved hand. "Give us the drive, and the gun." Lily's blood ran cold. They knew. They knew exactly what she had. "I do not know what you are talking about." Lily lied, her voice shaking. She looked around for a weapon, a knife, a frying pan. Anything. "Do not play games," the first man said. "We tore this place apart looking for it. Hand it over, and maybe you walk out of here with just a few broken bones." "Go to hell," Lily shouted. She bolted. She didn't run away from them. There was nowhere to go. She ran at them, hoping to surprise them, aiming for the gap between the second man and the door frame. She was fast, but they were ready. The second man lunged, grabbing the back of her denim jacket. Lily twisted violently, the sound of tearing fabric filling the air. She spun, lashing out with her foot, connecting with his shin. He grunted but didn't let go. "Grab her!" Lily screamed, a raw, tearing sound. She yanked herself free, losing her jacket in the process, and stumbled backward into the living room. She crashed into a side table, sending a ceramic lamp shattering to the floor. The first man was on her in a second. He grabbed her by the shoulders and slammed her against the wall. The impact knocked the breath out of her lungs. Stars exploded in her vision. "The backpack," he snarled, reaching for the straps. Lily fought like a wild animal. She clawed at his mask, her nails digging in. She kicked, bit, and thrashed, fueled by the terrifying certainty that if they took the bag, they would kill her next. "Get off me!" she shrieked. The man raised a fist to strike her, to silence her. Lily flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the blow. It never came. There was a sickening thud of meat hitting meat. The weight pressing Lily against the wall vanished. She opened her eyes to see the intruder flying backward across the room, as if he had been hit by a freight train. He crashed into the bookshelf, collapsing in a heap of splintered wood and paper. Dante Moretti stood in the center of the living room. He looked like a demon rising from smoke. His chest was heaving, his eyes blazing with a fury so cold it burned. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with tension. The second intruder, the one holding Lily's jacket, fumbled for his waistband. He pulled out a pistol. "Dante!" Lily screamed. Dante didn't look at the gun. He looked at Lily. He moved with a speed that defied logic, closing the distance between them and shoving her hard. "Down!" Lily hit the floor behind the overturned sofa just as a gunshot cracked through the room. The bullet bit into the door frame where Lily's head had been a second ago, sending a spray of splinters into the air. Dante did not retreat. He advanced. The shooter fired again, wild this time, panic setting in as he realized who he was facing. The shot went wide, shattering the kitchen window. Dante closed the distance. He caught the shooter's wrist in one hand and his throat in the other. There was a sharp crack of bone, a wrist breaking, followed by a strangled cry. Dante slammed the man's head against the wall. Once. Twice. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the carpet. The first intruder, the one Dante had thrown, was scrambling toward the open door, clutching his ribs. He looked at Dante, saw the carnage, and made a choice. He fled. Footsteps pounding down the hallway stairs. Silence rushed back into the apartment, heavy and ringing. The room smelled of gunpowder, ozone, and old dust. Lily lay on the floor behind the sofa, curled into a ball, clutching her backpack to her chest. Her ears were ringing. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps that sounded too loud in the quiet. Dante stood over the unconscious man for a moment, chest rising and falling. He kicked the gun away, sliding it across the floor. Then he turned. The rage on his face evaporated the moment he saw her. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to a crouch in front of her. He did not touch her. He kept his hands visible, hovering near her face, palms open. "Lily," he said. His voice was rough, breathless. "Lily, look at me!" Lily lifted her head. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown black with shock. She was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. "Are you hurt?" Dante asked. He scanned her frantically, checking for blood, for bullet holes. "Did they hit you?" Lily shook her head, a jerky, mechanical motion. No, I am okay." "You are not okay," Dante murmured. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair away from her face. His hand was shaking. The realization that he was shaking terrified him more than the gunshots. His gaze dropped to her chest, to the backpack she was crushing in her arms. The zipper had been torn open in the struggle. The glint of silver metal was visible. The ivory grip, the lion crest, and dangling from the side pocket, attached to a novelty keychain, was a silver flash drive. Dante went still. He stared at the items, the evidence, the gun that had killed men, the drive that people were willing to kill for. He looked back up at Lily. The connection solidified in his mind, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't a random burglary. This wasn't a debt collection. This was a hit. "They knew," Dante said, his voice flat. "They asked for the drive." Lily nodded, tears finally spilling over, hot tracks cutting through the dust on her cheeks. They said, "Give us the gun." Dante sat back on his heels. He ran a hand over his face, wiping away a smear of plaster dust. "You cannot stay here," he said. "I am not going anywhere with you," Lily snapped, though the defiance was weak, brittle. She scrambled backward, hitting the sofa. This is your fault. You people, you destroy everything." "This was not me," Dante said. He didn't shout. He spoke with a quiet, deadly intensity that cut through her panic. "Look at me. Lily, look at the man on the floor. That is not my crew. That is a hired gun from out of town. If I wanted you dead, I would not have had to break down your door to do it." "Then who?" Lily cried. "Who sent them?" "I do not know yet," Dante admitted. "But I know that gun." He pointed a trembling finger at the weapon in her bag. "That gun," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "belonged to my brother, Luca. He died with it in his hand 3 years ago." Lily stopped breathing. She stared at him, She saw the pain in his eyes, raw, unmasked, bleeding. It was not the look of a killer. It was the look of a brother who had been grieving for 1,000 days. "Luca," she whispered, the name on the grip. L.M. "I need to know how you have it," Dante said, "but not here, not now. Whoever sent them will realize they failed. They will send more. And next time, they will not ask nicely." He stood up and extended a hand toward her. "Come with me," he said. Lily looked at his hand. It was broad, scarred, and steady. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "Because I am the only thing standing between you and a bullet right now," Dante said, "and because I want to know the truth just as much as you do." Lily hesitated. She looked at her wrecked apartment. She thought of Emma. Safe for tonight, but what about tomorrow? If they came back... She tightened her grip on the backpack strap. Her knuckles turned white. "I am not dying," she whispered, her voice hardening. "I am not dying before I make them pay for Mark." She reached up and took Dante's hand. He pulled her to her feet. He didn't let go. He pulled her close, his body shielding hers, and walked her out of the ruined apartment, stepping over the unconscious man without a backward glance. The drive to the penthouse was a blur of city lights streaking past rain-slicked windows. Lily sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself, the backpack at her feet. Dante drove in silence, his eyes checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The penthouse was located at the top of a glass spire in the city center, a world away from the gritty streets of the East End. When the elevator doors slid open, Lily felt as if she had stepped onto another planet. The space was cavernous. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Harborview, turning the ugly city into a glittering jewel box. The furniture was sleek, Italian leather, chrome, and marble. Everything was pristine, cold. Lily stood on the polished concrete floor in her torn shirt and dusty jeans, feeling small and dirty. She clutched her backpack like a lifeline. Dante locked the elevator with a key card and turned to her. He seemed to shed the violence of the last hour, shifting into a mode that was surprisingly domestic. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a massive white sofa. "Please." Lily sat on the edge of the cushion, ready to bolt. Dante disappeared into a hallway and returned a moment later with a glass of water, a bottle of aspirin, and a folded black t-shirt. "Drink," he ordered gently. He placed the items on the coffee table. "And take these. You will be sore tomorrow." Lily took the water. Her hands shook so much some of it sloshed onto her thumb. She drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. "The bathroom is down the hall. Second door on the left," Dante said. "There are clean towels. You can shower if you want. Change into the shirt." He picked up a cashmere throw blanket from an armchair and placed it next to her. "I will be in the kitchen," he said. "I need to make a call. To ensure your niece is safe." Lily looked up sharply. "How do you know about Emma?" "I know everything, Lily," Dante said softly. "But I promise you, she is safe. I will have a car sit outside her friend's house all night. No one will touch her." He walked away before she could argue, giving her space. Lily stared at his back. He was a paradox. He had just broken a man's wrist with his bare hands, and now he was offering her aspirin and guarding her niece. Later, after a hot shower that washed away the dust but not the fear. Lily emerged wearing Dante's t-shirt. It hung to her mid-thighs, smelling of cedar and him. She found Dante standing on the balcony, the sliding glass door open to the night air. He had abandoned his holster. He stood leaning against the railing, staring out at the city grid. Lily stepped out. The wind was cold, but she didn't feel it. Dante turned his head. His eyes swept over her, lingering on the bruise forming on her arm, then moving up to her face. "Is Emma okay?" Lily asked. "She is asleep," Dante said. "My men are on the street, invisible. She's safer than the president." Lily nodded. She moved to stand beside him, keeping a foot of distance between them. "Why?" she asked. The word hung in the air. "Why what? Why help me?" Lily looked at the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "You could have taken the drive. You could have taken the gun. You could have left me there." Dante turned his body toward her. He looked exhausted. the weight of his legacy pulling down the corners of his mouth. "I am tired, Lily," he confessed. His voice was low, carried away by the wind. "I'm tired of the bodies. I'm tired of pretending that blood washes off. When I saw you tonight, when I saw them touch you—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I have spent my whole life being the monster people expect me to be," he said. "Tonight, I wanted to be something else." Lily looked at him. She saw the cracks in the armor. She saw the man who kept a photo of his dead brother on his desk. "I am tired too," she whispered. "I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of checking the locks 3 times a night." The distance between them seemed to shrink, though neither of them had moved. "You do not have to be scared tonight," Dante said. He reached out, his hand hovering near the small of her back, not touching, just offering warmth. Lily looked up at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, aching vulnerability. She saw the way he looked at her, not as a waitress, not as a witness, but as a woman who had just walked through fire with him. His gaze dropped to her lips, his breath hitched. A small, audible sound that betrayed his control. Slowly, carefully. Dante raised his hand. He cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. He gave her a moment, a heartbeat, to pull away, to step back. She didn't. Lily leaned into his touch. She closed her eyes, seeking the comfort of it. Dante made a low noise in his throat. He tilted her head back and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked in the dark. His lips were soft, testing the waters, but the moment they connected, something snapped. The tension that had been building since the diner, the fear, the violence, it all ignited. Lily let out a soft gasp against his mouth. She reached up, fisting her hands in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. Dante responded instantly. His arm swept around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He groaned, a deep vibration against her chest, and deepened the kiss. It wasn't polite. It was desperate. It was the taste of survival. He devoured her, his mouth moving over hers with a hunger that stole her breath. Lily opened to him, matching his intensity. She felt the hard planes of his chest, the strength in the arm that held her up. For the first time in 3 years, the cold dread in her stomach was replaced by heat. Dante's hand tangled in her damp hair, angling her head to access her more fully. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was the only air left in the world. It was a kiss that tasted of forbidden things, of lines crossed that could never be uncrossed. When they finally broke apart, they were both gasping. Dante rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. His chest rose and fell rapidly against hers. His hand remained on her neck, his thumb stroking her pulse point, which was fluttering wildly. "Lily," he breathed, her name sounding like a prayer and a curse. "I know," she whispered back, her voice trembling. They stood there on the balcony, high above the city that wanted to destroy them both, held together by secrets and a sudden, terrifying gravitation. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They both knew that the rules had changed. The line between enemy and lover had been erased, and there was no going back. The morning light felt intrusive. It poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse guest room, a brilliant, sterile white that offered no place to hide. Lily Hart woke with a gasp, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs before her eyes even opened. For a split second, she expected the smell of stale cooking oil and damp plaster from her apartment building. Instead, she inhaled the scent of expensive Egyptian cotton and the faint, lingering aroma of cedar wood. She sat up, clutching the duvet to her chest. She was still wearing the black t-shirt Dante had given her the night before. It was too big, the soft fabric swallowing her frame, but it felt like armor. Memory washed over her in a disorienting wave, the break-in, the gunshots, the ride here, and then the balcony. She raised a trembling hand to her lips. They felt tender, swollen. She could still taste him, the heat, the desperation, the terrifying softness of a man who was supposed to be made of stone. She had kissed him. She had kissed Dante Moretti. She had pressed her body against the heir to the syndicate that had turned her life into a graveyard. A wave of shame crashed into her, hot and suffocating. "What are you doing?" she whispered to the empty room. Her voice sounded thin, fragile in the vast modern silence of the suite. "He is one of them." She threw the covers off, needing to move, needing to escape the comfort of the bed. She walked to the window. Harbor view sprawled out below, a grid of gray concrete and steel. From this height, the city looked peaceful, organized. It was a lie, down there, in the shadows. People were bleeding. Down there, Mark was dead, and she was up here, sleeping in the enemy's castle, dreaming of the enemy's mouth. Lily turned away from the glass, her jaw setting in a hard line. She could not afford to be soft. Softness was what got you killed. She needed to be sharp. She needed to be a weapon. She found her jeans folded neatly on a chair. She pulled them on, her fingers fumbling with the button. She splashed cold water on her face in the ensuite bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, her eyes dark-circled, but there was a fire in them that hadn't been there yesterday. She was done running. Lily walked out of the guest room and down the long, polished hallway. The penthouse was silent, but it was a heavy silence, pregnant with tension. She followed the faint sound of a voice, electronic, distorted, coming from a room at the end of the hall, Dante's office. The door was ajar. Lily pushed it open with a hand that refused to stop shaking. Dante was sitting behind a massive desk of black glass. He was still wearing the clothes from the night before, the dark trousers, the white dress shirt now unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His face was gray, the stubble on his jaw standing out starkly against his pale skin. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the screen of her laptop, which sat open on the desk. The flash drive was plugged in. Lily had left it for him. It had been a test. She realized now, a silent challenge. Watch it. See what your family did, and then tell me I am wrong. Dante watched the screen with an expression of utter devastation. On the video, the chaotic, shaky footage of the warehouse interior played out. The sound was turned up. The crack of gunfire was sharp and biting. The shouts of men dying echoed off the sleek, minimalist walls of the office. Then, a voice cut through the noise on the recording. It was shouting orders. It was a voice that demanded obedience. "Burn it! Leave no one. Make sure the inventory is destroyed." Dante's face drained of all color. His eyes went wide, horrific recognition dawning in them. He stopped the video, freezing the frame on a blurry figure in the background. Lily stepped into the room. "You recognize the voice," she said. It wasn't a question. Dante jerked his head up. He looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked completely defenseless. His eyes were haunted, swimming with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Lily," he croaked. His voice was wrecked. "Tell me who it is," Lily demanded, walking closer. Her heart was pounding, a drum of war in her ears. She needed him to say it. She needed him to admit it. Dante looked back at the screen. He swallowed hard, his throat working. "It is my father," he whispered. The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Lily let out a sharp, bitter laugh. It was a sound void of humor. "I knew it. I told myself it had to be, but hearing you say it, hearing you admit that the great Tomas Moretti ordered a massacre." "I did not know," Dante said. He stood up slowly, as if his body weighed 1,000 pounds. "Lily, you have to believe me. I knew there was a conflict. I knew we hit the warehouse, but this was not a hit. This was a slaughter. And you are his son," Lily shouted, her control snapping. "You are his right hand. How could you not know? Do you just sign the checks and look the other way when the bodies pile up?" "I am not my father," Dante roared. He grabbed a heavy crystal tumbler from his desk, half full of amber liquid, and hurled it across the room. The glass smashed against the far wall with a violence that made Lily jump. Shards of crystal exploded outward, raining down onto the pristine floor like diamonds. The whiskey left a dark, weeping stain on the white paint. Dante stood panting, his chest heaving. He looked at the wall, then at his hands. as if he didn't recognize them. "I did not know," he repeated, his voice dropping to a jagged whisper. "My father, he told me it was a rival faction. He told me they shot first. He told me Luca died defending the family." He looked at the screen again, at the frozen image of the masked men. "I recognize them," he said, the admission tearing itself out of his throat. "That one, on the left, the way he holds his rifle, that is Rico. He was my father's driver for 10 years. And that one, the one near the door, that is Vinny. He used to come to Sunday dinner." He looked at Lily, his eyes burning with a terrible, wet heat. "They were our men," he said. "My men." The confession shattered something in the room. It shattered the last illusion of Dante's innocence. It shattered the fragile truce they had built on the balcony. Lily stared at him, tears of rage pricking her eyes. "My fiancé was hiding behind a crate," she said, her voice shaking. "I was 20 feet away. I heard him scream my name, Dante. I heard him beg, and then I heard them laugh. Was that Rico laughing? Was that Vinny?" "Stop," Dante pleaded. He walked around the desk, moving toward her. He looked like a man reaching for a lifeline. "Do not come near me," Lily warned, stepping back. "You are one of them. You are just like them." "No," Dante said fiercely. He didn't stop. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Lily shoved him. She placed her hands flat against his chest and pushed with all her strength. "Get away from me!" She might as well have tried to move a mountain. Dante didn't budge. Instead, he reached out and caught her wrists. His grip was hard, bordering on painful. He pinned her hands against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating. Fast, erratic, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. "I am not them," Dante snarled, looking down into her face. His eyes were wild, dark with a storm of emotions she couldn't name. Anger, guilt, and something else. Something hot and terrifying. "I did not pull the trigger. Lily, I would never have sanctioned this." "Your name is on the gun," Lily cried, struggling against his grip. "Your blood is on this." "Then help me clean it," Dante yelled back. They froze. They were standing inches apart, breathing the same air. Lily's chest heaved against his. She could smell the whiskey on his breath, mixed with the coffee he must have been drinking for hours. She looked up into his face, seeing the lines of strain, the raw desperation in his eyes. For a moment, the anger bled into something else. The adrenaline of the argument twisted, morphing into a sharp, undeniable attraction. She hated him. She hated him for who he was, and yet she could feel the heat of his skin through his shirt. She could feel the strength in his hands holding her wrists. She remembered the way he had kissed her, the way he had made her feel protected. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth. His grip on her wrists loosened slightly, his thumbs brushing over the sensitive skin of her inner arms. He leaned in, just an inch. Lily's breath hitched. She didn't pull away. She should have spit in his face, but her body betrayed her. She leaned forward, drawn into his orbit by a gravity she couldn't fight. Dante stopped. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, a look of intense pain crossing his face. Then, abruptly, he released her wrists. He stepped back, putting 3 feet of distance between them. "No," he said, his voice rough. "No." Lily stumbled slightly, bereft of his support. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold. "We cannot do this," Dante said. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the dark strands. "We need clear heads. Lily, not this. Not tangled sheets and confused loyalties. If we are distracted, even for a second, my father will bury us both." The rejection, no, the restraint stung, but it also sharpened the desire. It left the tension hanging in the room, a taut wire ready to snap. "You are right," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to survive first." "Yes," Dante said. He turned away from her, walking back to the window, unable to look at her. "Get dressed. We have work to do." Across the city, in a study that smelled of old leather and expensive cigars, Marco Vieri stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Tomas Moretti sat in his armchair. He was an old man, shrinking inside his expensive suit, but his eyes were still as sharp as broken glass. He held a cane with a silver lion's head handle, his fingers tapping a rhythmic, impatient beat on the wood. "The girl is a problem," Marco said smoothly, "and Dante is becoming a liability." "He is my son," Tomas rasped. His voice was the same one from the video, just older, weaker. "He's soft. He always has been. He takes after his mother." "He has the drive," Marco reminded him, "and the gun. If he decides to use them—" "He will not," Tomas said dismissively. "He is a Moretti. Loyalty is bred into him. He's just confused. He's thinking with his heart, not his head." The old man leaned forward, the leather creaking. "Bring them to me," Tomas ordered. "Tonight, tell Dante I want a meeting. Tell him to bring the girl and the evidence. We will settle this as a family." "And if he refuses?" Marco asked. "He will not refuse his father," Tomas said. "Remind him that family comes first, always." Marco nodded. "Understood, Don Moretti." Marco turned to leave. As he walked out of the study, a small, cold smile touched his lips. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He did not call Dante. He dialed a number that was not saved in his contacts. "Change of plans," Marco said into the phone, his voice low. "The old man wants a meeting, but we are not going to let it get that far. Be ready at the secondary location. When they move, you move." He hung up. Marco had no intention of letting Dante or the girl survive the night. It was time for a new king in Harborview. The sun had begun to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the penthouse floor. Dante walked back into the living room. He had showered and changed into a fresh suit, but he didn't look like the confident mob boss anymore. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. Lily was sitting on the sofa, her backpack at her feet. She stood up when he entered. "My father called," Dante said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Lily tensed. "And? He wants a meeting," Dante said. "Tonight. He wants me to bring you. And the drive." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. She took a step back. "You are turning me in." "No," Dante said. "You just said he wants me," Lily cried, panic rising in her chest. "You are going to give me to him. You said you wanted to help me." "I am going to help you," Dante said. "But we have to go to him." "I am not going," Lily shouted. She grabbed her backpack, backing away until she hit the wall. "I am not going to let you hand me over to the man who ordered Mark's death. I knew I couldn't trust you. I knew it." "Lily, listen to me," Dante snapped. He crossed the room. Lily tried to dodge him, but he was too fast. He didn't grab her this time. He slammed his hands against the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. Lily gasped, pressing herself flat against the plaster. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm not handing you over," Dante said. His face was inches from hers. He was breathing hard, his anger vibrating through his frame. "Do you think I would let him touch you? Do you think I would let him hurt you after what I saw in that video? Then why?" Lily whispered, tears spilling over. "Why take me there?" "Because it is the only way to end this," Dante said ferociously. "If we run, they will hunt us. They will find Emma. They will burn everything you love. The only way we survive is if we cut the head off the snake. We have to face him." He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "I need you to trust me," he said. His voice broke, revealing the raw, bleeding wound underneath his anger. "I will not let you disappear into some basement, Lily. I swear to you on my brother's grave. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let them lay a hand on you." The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. It wasn't the cold stare of a killer. It was the fierce, terrifying protectiveness of a man who had found the one thing he was willing to die for. Lily looked at him. She saw the truth in his face. She saw the fear he was trying to hide, fear not for himself, but for her. Her resolve wavered. Her body responded to his nearness, the heat of him seeping into her cold skin. Her breath hitched, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, clutching the crisp cotton. She hated how safe she felt with him. She hated that even now, trapped against a wall. She wanted to lean into him. Dante's eyes dropped to her lips. The air between them crackled. It would be so easy to close the gap, to let the fear dissolve into passion, to kiss him and forget the war that was waiting outside. He leaned in. His breath brushed her cheek. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. She wanted it. God, she wanted it, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not while the ghost of her past was still screaming. She placed her hands on his chest and pushed. "Prove it," she whispered. Dante stopped. He looked at her, his eyes dark and searching. "Prove it," Lily repeated, opening her eyes. Her voice was shaking, but her gaze was steady. "Do not just give me words and heat, Dante. Prove you are on my side. Get us out of this alive. And then, maybe then." Dante stared at her for a long moment. Then, he nodded. He stepped back, dropping his hands from the wall. The loss of his warmth was immediate and jarring. "Okay," he said. "I will prove it." He turned and walked to the table where he had placed a holster. He strapped it on, checking the weapon with practiced, lethal efficiency. "Get your bag," he said, not looking back. "We are leaving." Night had fallen completely by the time the black sedan pulled out of the underground garage. Dante drove. Lily sat in the passenger seat, the backpack on her lap. Her hand rested on the zipper, right above where the gun lay. They moved through the city streets, a silent vessel navigating a sea of neon and rain. 3 blocks behind them, a gray van pulled out from a side street, inside the penthouse. Marco's phone buzzed with a message. "Target is on the move. We are behind them." Marco sat in Dante's chair, staring out at the city view. He smiled. "Goodbye, Dante," he whispered. The trap was set. The noose was tightening, and neither of the lovers in the black car saw it coming. The city skyline, a jagged row of illuminated teeth against the night sky, began to shrink in the rearview mirror. Dante drove with a focused, terrifying silence. His hands were loose on the steering wheel, but the tendons in his forearms were tight, betraying the storm raging behind his composure. Lily sat in the passenger seat, her knees pulled up to her chest. She gripped the straps of her backpack until her fingers ached. The gun was heavy against her thighs. "You missed the turn," she said. Her voice was small in the quiet luxury of the car. "The docks are east. We are heading west." "We are not going to the docks," Dante said. He didn't look at her. His eyes were scanning the mirrors, watching the darkness behind them. "But your father," Lily started. "You said we had to face him." "We will," Dante interrupted. "But not on his turf, and not until I know who is holding the leash." He checked the mirror again. The highway was empty. "I do not like the way Marco looked when I left," Dante admitted, his voice low. "He was too compliant, too quiet. If we walk into that warehouse tonight, we might not walk out. I need time to think. I need to see that footage again." He pulled the car off the highway onto a cracked 2-lane road that wound through the dense tree line. A few miles down, a flickering neon sign buzzed in the darkness. The Pineview Motel, vacancy. It was a place that time had forgotten. A row of low-slung cabins with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. It was the last place anyone would look for the Prince of Harborview. Dante parked the car in the shadows behind the main office. He killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was heavy, amplified by the sound of wind rattling the dry leaves outside. "We stay here tonight," he said, "just for a few hours, just until dawn." Lily looked at the motel. It looked like the kind of place where bad things happened. But then she looked at Dante. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deep and shadowed. He wasn't the monster tonight. He was just a man trying to keep them both alive. "Okay," she whispered. Dante went into the office alone, returning a moment later with a physical key attached to a plastic diamond tag. "Room 9, he said. The room was small, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old cigarettes. The carpet was a faded brown, worn thin by decades of transient footsteps. There was a small table with 2 wobbly chairs, a television from the 90s, and a single bed. The bed dominated the room. It was narrow, covered in a questionable floral bedspread. Lily stopped in the doorway, her breath hitching. The intimacy of the space was immediate and overwhelming. In the penthouse, there had been hallways, rooms, space to breathe. Here, There was nowhere to hide. Dante locked the door behind them, throwing the deadbolt and engaging the chain. He pulled the heavy curtains shut, plunging the room into a gloom lit only by the sputtering fluorescent light from the bathroom. "I will take the floor," Dante said, noticing her stare at the bed. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over the back of a chair. "You take the bed. Try to rest." "I cannot sleep," Lily said. She placed her backpack on the table, treating it like a bomb that might go off if handled roughly. "Then shower," Dante suggested gently. "Wash the day off. You will think clearer." Lily nodded. She grabbed the backpack, refusing to leave it, and retreated into the bathroom. The bathroom was cramped, the tiles yellowed with age. Lily locked the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes. She caught her reflection in the spotted mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and frantic. She looked like a fugitive. She stripped off the borrowed clothes, her hands shaking. She stepped into the shower, turning the water as hot as she could stand. She stood there for a long time, letting the heat beat against her skin, trying to scrub away the feeling of Dante's hands on her wrists, the memory of his mouth on hers. She couldn't. The ache in her chest wasn't fear anymore. It was a confusing, heavy longing. She hated him for who he was, but she felt safer with him in this dirty motel room than she had felt in 3 years. When she emerged, dressed again in her jeans and the oversized black t-shirt, Dante was sitting on the edge of the bed. He had set up the laptop on the small table, but he had dragged the table over to the bedside. The only light came from the screen and the flickering bulb in the bathroom, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "Come here," Dante said. He didn't look up from the screen. "I found something." Lily hesitated, then walked over. She sat on the edge of the bed, leaving 2 feet of distance between them. Dante hit play. The footage of the massacre began to roll again. The sounds of shouting and gunfire filled the small room, a horrific soundtrack to their night. "Watch the man by the door," Dante said, pointing to the screen. "The one I thought was Vinny." Lily watched. The masked figure stood guard, holding an assault rifle. "Watch his left hand," Dante instructed. On the screen, the man raised his hand. He didn't wave. He didn't point. He made a fist, thumb extended, and tapped it twice against his chest before signaling forward. Dante paused the video. "That's Signal," Dante said, his voice tight. "That is not us. The Moretti crew uses hand signals derived from military standard. We use open palm for stop, raised fist for hold. We never tap the chest. That is a signature." "A signature of who?" Lily asked, looking at Dante's profile. The blue light of the screen illuminated the sharp angle of his jaw, the tension in his neck. "The Verona Syndicate," Dante said. "They are a rival family from the south. They have been trying to push into Harborview for a decade." He turned to look at her. The realization in his eyes was cold and sharp. "Marco?" he whispered. "Marco has been pushing for peace treaties with Verona for months. He said it was good for business. But if he used Verona men for this hit, if he used them to kill your fiancé and burn that warehouse, then he is working with them." Lily finished the thought. "He's betraying your father. He's betraying everyone," Dante said. "He used my father's paranoia to order the hit, but he used Verona men to execute it. He's playing both sides. He wants the families to destroy each other so he can pick up the pieces." Dante ran a hand over his face, rubbing his eyes. "I trusted him. He was my brother's best friend. He sat at my table." Lily watched him. She saw the armor crack. She saw the immense weight of the betrayal settling on his shoulders. He wasn't the untouchable Mafia prince in this moment. He was a man who had lost his brother, his father's soul, and now his closest friend. Without thinking, she shifted closer. Her knee brushed against his thigh. Dante didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch, just slightly, as if he were starving for contact. "I tried to stop it," he said quietly, staring at his hands. "For years, Lily, I tried to move the family into legitimate business. Construction, waste management. I wanted to stop the bleeding, but it is like trying to hold back the tide with your hands. The more I try to fix it, the more blood gets on me." Lily looked at his hands. The knuckles were bruised from the fight in her apartment. There was a small cut on his thumb. They were violent hands, yes, but they were also the hands that had pulled her out of the line of fire. "You are not them," Lily said softly. It was the first time she had said it without anger. "You are trying to be better." "Trying is not enough," Dante murmured. "Not when people are dead." A sudden, sharp crack of thunder shook the room. It was loud, explosive, like a gunshot right outside the window. Lily gasped, her entire body jerking. She squeezed her eyes shut, her hands flying up to cover her ears. It was a reflex born of trauma, a visceral reaction to loud, sudden noises that took her straight back to the warehouse floor. She felt the mattress dip. A warm, heavy hand covered hers. Dante didn't say anything. He didn't tell her it was just thunder. He simply wrapped his large hand over her trembling fingers, his thumb sweeping back and forth across her knuckles in a steady, grounding rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2. Lily focused on the sensation, the roughness of his skin, the heat, the solid reality of him. Slowly, the panic receded. She lowered her hands, but Dante didn't let go. He laced his fingers through hers, holding on tight. The storm broke outside. Rain slammed against the roof and the single window, a torrent of noise that isolated them from the rest of the world. The lights in the room flickered, once, twice, and then died completely. They were plunged into darkness. A second later, a flash of lightning illuminated the room in stark, blue-white relief. It revealed their faces, inches apart. They had moved closer in the dark. Lily was turned toward him, her legs tucked under her. Dante was facing her, his body angled to shield her from the window. The air in the room changed. The tension that had been humming under the surface all night snapped, replaced by something heavier, hotter. Lily looked at him in the strobe light flashes of the storm. She saw the hunger in his eyes. It mirrored her own. She was terrified of the future. She was grieving the past. But right now, in this dark room, she was alive, and she needed to feel that. She needed to feel something other than fear. "Dante," she whispered. His name was a plea. Dante made a low sound in his throat, a rumble of want that she felt in her own chest. He reached out with his free hand and cupped her face. His thumb traced the line of her lower lip, gentle and reverent. "Lily," he murmured, "if I touch you now, I will not be able to stop." "I do not want you to stop," Lily said. She reached up and curled her fingers into the hair at the nape of his neck. She pulled him down. Their mouths met with a desperation that stole the breath from her lungs. It wasn't gentle. It was consuming. It was two people clinging to each other as the world burned down around them. Dante groaned, a raw sound of surrender. He released her hand and wrapped both arms around her waist, lifting her effortlessly. He pulled her into his lap, bringing her flush against his chest. Lily gasped at the contact. She straddled his legs, pressing herself against him, needing to be as close as physically possible. She felt the hard planes of his chest, the rapid hammering of his heart against hers. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curve of her spine, tangling in her hair, gripping her waist to anchor her. He kissed her jaw, her neck, the sensitive spot behind her ear. Every touch set her skin on fire. "You are beautiful," he whispered against her skin, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the only clean thing in this world." "I am not clean," Lily choked out, holding onto his shoulders to keep from falling apart. "I am broken, Dante." "Then we are broken together," he said. He found her mouth again, kissing her deeply, drinking her in. Lily met him measure for measure. She poured all her anger, her grief, and her fear into the kiss, and he took it all. He laid her back against the pillows. The bed creaked under their weight, in the darkness, lit only by the storm. The lines between them dissolved. There was no Mafia boss. There was no waitress. There was only the heat of skin, the ragged sound of breathing, and the desperate, affirming act of being alive. The scene faded into the shadows as the wind howled outside, leaving them wrapped in each other's arms, finding a temporary peace in the eye of the hurricane. Morning arrived with a cruel, gray light that filtered through the thin curtains. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside wet and silent. Lily woke slowly. She was warm. She was lying with her head on Dante's chest. His arm was draped loosely around her waist, holding her even in sleep. She could hear the steady, rhythmic thud of his heart beneath her ear. For a moment she lay there, suspended in the space between dreams and reality. She felt safe. She felt cherished. Then, memory returned. She stiffened. She was lying in the arms of a man whose family crest was stamped on the gun in her bag. She had slept with the enemy, and God help her, she didn't regret it. Dante stirred. His arm tightened around her instinctively before he woke fully. He opened his eyes, blinking against the light, when he looked down and saw her watching him. His expression softened into a raw, unguarded tenderness that made Lily's heart ache. He reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "Morning," he rasped, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning," Lily whispered. They stared at each other, the weight of the night before hanging between them. There were 1,000 things they needed to say, but neither of them knew how to start. The silence was shattered by the harsh buzz of a cell phone vibrating on the wooden table. The sound was like a siren. Dante's face hardened instantly. The tenderness vanished, replaced by the mask of the dawn. He sat up, dislodging Lily gently, and grabbed the phone. He looked at the screen. Marco. He put a finger to his lips, signaling Lily to be silent. He answered the call, putting it on speaker so she could hear. "Where are you?" Marco's voice was sharp, agitated. "Your father is losing his patience. Dante, he expected you hours ago. We had car trouble." Dante lied smoothly. "We're on our way back to the city now." "Where are you?" Marco repeated. "I can send a car to pick you up. The roads are slick." "We are fine," Dante said. "We will be there in an hour." "Dante," Marco's voice dropped. "You need to hurry. There are rumors. The Verona crew is moving in. They know you are exposed. If you are not at the docks soon, I cannot guarantee your safety. I have men sweeping the West Highways looking for you." Dante's eyes met Lily's. The West Highways. They were west of the city. Dante had never told Marco they were heading west. He had only told him they were coming. Marco knew where they were. "I will see you soon." "Marco," Dante said coldly. He hung up. "He knows," Dante said, standing up and reaching for his shirt. "He knows we are west. He has men sweeping the roads. That means he is tracking the car, or he guessed." "What do we do?" Lily asked. Scrambling out of bed, she grabbed her jeans, the soft intimacy of the morning evaporating like mist. Dante buttoned his shirt, his movements sharp and precise. "We stop running," he said. "Marco wants a delivery? We will give him one." He turned to Lily. "Do you still have that friend? The one who knows computers? The one you trusted with the backup of the drive?" "Yes," Lily said. "Why?" "We're going to the meeting," Dante said. "But we are not walking in blind. We are going to rig that drive. If anything happens to us, if my heart stops beating, or if yours does, I want that video sent to every news outlet, every police precinct, and every federal agency in the state. Instant upload. A dead man's switch," Lily realized. "Exactly," Dante said. He checked his gun, sliding it into the holster. He looked at her, and the fire in his eyes was terrifying. "They want to play games with our lives? Let us see how they play when the whole world is watching." He held out his hand to her. "Are you ready?" Lily looked at him. She grabbed her backpack, swinging it onto her shoulder. She took his hand, squeezing it hard. "Let's go," she said. "I want my life back." The Harborview docks were a graveyard of rusted metal and forgotten sins. Fog rolled off the black water, curling around the shipping containers stacked like tombstones under the sickly yellow glare of the floodlights. It was here that Dante Moretti had earned his stripes as a young enforcer. It was here that Lily Hart's life had been shattered 3 years ago when a warehouse fire claimed everything she loved. Now, they were back to finish it. Dante killed the engine of the sedan 100 yards out, hidden in the shadow of a crane. The silence inside the car was heavy, thick with the knowledge that they might not leave this place alive. "Turn around," Lily whispered. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the collar of his shirt. Dante shifted, letting her work. Lily's fingers felt cold against his skin as she taped the small, high-fidelity microphone to the underside of his lapel. She hid the wire with practiced care, tucking the transmitter into his inner pocket. "Can you hear me?" Dante asked, his voice a low rumble. Lily checked the app on her phone, which was propped up in the open mouth of her backpack on her lap. "Audio is clear. The camera lens is unobstructed. As soon as we step out, the stream goes live to the private server. If I hit the emergency button, or if the connection cuts, it uploads everything to the list. The news stations, the FBI, the contact at the precinct." "Good," Dante said. He reached out and took her hands. Stopping their frantic movement, he curled his large fingers around hers, his grip firm and grounding. "Lily," he said, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. If bullets start flying, if Marco makes a move I cannot counter, you run. You do not look back. You do not try to save me. You run." Lily stared at him. In the dim light of the dashboard, his face was set in grim lines, but his eyes were fierce with a protective fire that made her chest ache. "No," she whispered. "This is not a negotiation," Dante said sharply. "I know," Lily replied, her voice gaining strength. "But I am not leaving you. You are facing your monsters because of me. I am not going to let you face them alone." Dante looked at her for a long moment, a war of emotions playing across his face. Fear, frustration, and an overwhelming, desperate love. He leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and adrenaline. It was fierce and brief, a collision of fear and promise. It was a goodbye, and it was a vow. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. "Let's go," Dante said. They stepped out of the car and into the mist. They walked side by side toward the circle of light at the end of the pier. The wind whipped Lily's hair across her face, but she didn't flinch. She clutched her backpack strap with one hand, the other hanging by her side, brushing against Dante's sleeve. Tomas Moretti was waiting. The patriarch of the syndicate sat in a folding chair that looked like a throne, flanked by 4 armed men. He looked old and frail in the harsh light, a lion whose mane had grayed, but his presence was still suffocating. Marco Vieri stood at his right hand, looking cool and detached, his hands resting in the pockets of his trench coat. Dante and Lily stopped 10 feet away. "You brought her," Tomas rasped, his voice carrying over the sound of the lapping water. "And the evidence?" "It is here," Dante said. He stood tall, shielding Lily slightly with his body. "But we are not here to hand it over. Father, we are here to talk about the warehouse fire, about 3 years ago." Tomas sneered, his gaze sliding to Lily. "The waitress playing detective. You have caused a lot of trouble for a girl who pours coffee." Lily's knees felt like water, but she locked them straight. She stepped out from Dante's shadow. "I know what happened that night," she said. Her voice shook, but it was loud enough to be heard by the microphone, loud enough for the stream. "I know you ordered the hit. I know you told your men to burn it down with people inside. My fiancé, Mark Evans. He was 24. He begged for his life. Casualties of war," Tomas said dismissively. "Your fiancé was in the wrong place, just like you are now." Dante stepped forward. "And the Verona crew? Was that part of the war, Father? Or did you let Marco sell us out to our enemies just to get the job done?" Tomas frowned, confused. "Verona, what are you talking about?" Dante looked at Marco. "Tell him, Marco. Tell him who really pulled the trigger that night. Tell him whose men are standing behind you right now." Marco smiled. It was a cold, reptilian expression. "You always were smart, Dante," Marco said. "Too smart for your own good. But you are too soft." Marco pulled his hands from his pockets. He was holding a gun. He didn't point it at Lily. He pointed it at Dante. "What is the meaning of this?" Tomas demanded, trying to stand up. "Sit down, old man," Marco snapped. "Your time is done." Marco looked at Dante, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Tomas gave the order. Yes, he wanted the warehouse gone, but I was the one who made sure the Verona syndicate provided the muscle. I made a deal. They helped me clear the board, and I give them the North Territory once I take over." "You traitor," Tomas wheezed, his face turning purple. "I'm a businessman," Marco corrected. "I cleaned up the mess. I made sure all the witnesses died." He looked at Lily. Except you slipped through, a loose end. And now, Dante asked, his voice steady, you are going to kill your Don and his son? I'm going to tragedy, Marco said. A drug deal gone wrong. The Moretti leadership wiped out, and I will be the grieving lieutenant who steps up to restore order. The betrayal hit Dante like a physical blow, but he didn't falter. He saw the hesitation in the eyes of the guards behind Tomas. They were loyal to the name Moretti, not to Marco. He's lying to you, Dante shouted to the men. He sold us to Verona. He's working with the enemy. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't clear who fired first, but the docks exploded into chaos. 2 of the guards turned their weapons on Marco, while Marco's hired men, hidden in the shadows of the containers, opened fire on the group. Down! Dante yelled. He grabbed Lily and threw her behind a rusted shipping container just as bullets sparked against the metal, sending showers of hot iron into the air. Dante drew his weapon. He returned fire, leaning around the corner, his shots precise and controlled. He was fighting men he had once commanded, men whose names he knew. In the center of the kill zone, Tomas Moretti collapsed. He had been hit in the chest, crumpling to the concrete with a choked curse, betrayed by the monster he had created. Stay down, Dante ordered Lily. Dante, Lily screamed, pointing to the left. One of Marco's shooters had flanked them. He was moving in on Lily, raising his gun. There was no time to shoot, no time to think. Dante threw himself across the gap. He moved into the line of fire just as the gun cracked. The bullet slammed into Dante's shoulder. The impact spun him around. He dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth against a scream, his gun skittering across the pavement. Blood blossomed dark and fast on his white shirt. No, Lily shrieked. The fear that had paralyzed her vanished, replaced by a white-hot rage. She didn't look at Dante. She looked at her bag. She ripped the zipper open. Her hands, which had been shaking for days, were suddenly steady. She grabbed the gun, the compact silver pistol with the ivory grip, the gun that had started this war. She stood up. Marco was walking toward them, stepping over the body of a fallen guard. He raised his gun to finish Dante. Marco, Lily shouted. Marco turned, surprised to see the waitress standing there. He saw the gun in her hand and laughed. Go ahead, sweetheart, he scoffed, stepping closer. It is heavy. Do not hurt yourself. This is the gun from the warehouse, Lily said, her voice breaking but loud. You laughed that night, too. You laughed while Mark begged. And I am laughing now, Marco sneered. Drop it. The voice didn't come from Lily. It came from the darkness behind them. Sirens began to wail in the distance, a rising chorus of judgment. Blue and red lights flashed against the fog, drawing closer rapidly. The live stream, the upload. The police! Marco hissed, panic flickering in his eyes. You called the police? The whole world is watching. Marco, Lily said, gesturing to the phone in her bag, the light still glowing. They heard everything, your confession, Tomas's order. It is all in the cloud. Marco panicked. He looked at the approaching lights, then back at Lily. Desperation replaced arrogance. He raised his gun, deciding to take them with him. Dante lunged, bleeding, pale, and half dead. He summoned a final burst of strength. He tackled Marco around the waist, driving him back. They grappled on the wet concrete. Marco struck Dante's wounded shoulder, eliciting a cry of pain. But Dante didn't let go. He grabbed Marco's wrist, forcing the gun up. The gun went off. The sound was deafening. Marco went limp, collapsing with a cry as the bullet tore through his leg, shattering the bone. Dante fell back, his strength gone. He hit the ground hard, staring up at the night sky. Dante! Lily dropped her gun and fell to her knees beside him. She pulled his head into her lap, her hands pressing frantically against the wound in his shoulder. The blood was hot and slick. Stay with me, she begged, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the grime on her cheeks. Please, Dante, do not leave me. Not like this. Dante looked up at her. His vision was blurring at the edges, but he could see her face. He reached up with a bloodied hand, his thumb smearing the tears on her cheek. It is okay, he whispered, his voice a rattle in his chest. If I die tonight, at least it is finally for something that matters. You are not dying, Lily sobbed. I forbid it. Police, drop your weapons. Uniformed officers swarmed the pier, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Guns were trained on everyone. Lily raised her hands, shaking, her chest heaving. Do not shoot, she screamed. He is hurt. We have evidence. It is all on the drive. A detective, the honest one Lily had trusted, stepped forward, lowering his weapon as he recognized her. He signaled for the paramedics. We got the upload, Miss Hart, he said. We have it all. Dante let his head fall back against Lily's legs. He looked at the detective. The warehouse, Dante rasped, pointing a trembling finger toward the fallen body of his father. The records are in the safe, at the estate. Take it all down. He closed his eyes, choosing, for the first time in his life, to let the empire fall so the truth could stand. Time moved differently after that night. The scandal rocked the state for months. The headlines were relentless. Crime family implodes on live stream. The waitress who took down the mob. Tomas Moretti died of his injuries before he could stand trial. Marco Vieri was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His leg permanently ruined. His ambition turned to ash. The Moretti syndicate was dismantled piece by piece, their assets frozen, their soldiers arrested, and Dante served time. There was no escaping his past, no matter how heroic his final act. But his cooperation, the evidence he provided, and the testimony of Lily Hart earned him a reduced sentence. 6 months later, the autumn leaves were turning gold in Harborview. Lily worked at a small cafe near the university now. It was quiet, the coffee was good, she didn't have to watch the door. The bell chimed. It wasn't a threat. It was Emma. Aunt Lily! The 7-year-old ran in, her backpack bouncing, laughing as she dodged a table. Lily caught her in a hug, burying her face in the girl's hair. It was a small, precious normalcy that Lily had thought she lost forever. On the wall behind the counter, tucked away in a corner, was a small framed article. It detailed the exposure of the warehouse massacre. It wasn't a trophy, it was a reminder, a promise that the truth mattered. But the story wasn't over. One late afternoon, when the wind was crisp and the sky was a bruised purple, Lily walked through the metal detectors of a low-security correctional facility on the outskirts of the state. She sat in the visiting area. On the other side of the glass partition, a door opened. Dante walked in. He looked different, thinner. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a drab gray uniform. There was a small, pale scar on his temple. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. The haunted, predatory look was gone. In its place was a quiet, weary softness. He saw her. His entire expression changed. The guard dropped. A warmth broke through, unguarded and raw, lighting up his face like a sunrise. He sat down, picking up the phone receiver. Lily did the same. Hey, he said. His voice was the same, velvet and gravel, but it didn't scare her anymore. Hey, yourself, Lily said, smiling despite the lump in her throat. That color does not suit you. Dante chuckled, a genuine sound. I miss my tailor, and I miss real coffee. The stuff in here tastes like battery acid. I brought you a theoretical latte, Lily teased. Hazelnut, extra foam. You are cruel, Dante said, leaning his forehead against the glass. They were allowed to move to the supervised garden area for the last 10 minutes of the visit. There was no glass there, just a bench, a patch of grass, and a high fence. They sat side by side, not touching at first. I do not know who I am in here, Dante admitted quietly, looking at the sky. Without the name, without the fear. I'm just a man. That is all you ever needed to be, Lily said. I do not know how to trust the quiet yet. I still check the locks twice. Good, Dante said, looking at her. Keep checking them, until I can come check them for you. The air between them thickened. It wasn't the dangerous, adrenaline-fueled tension of the motel room. It was quieter, deeper. It was the tension of two people who had seen the worst of each other and stayed. They stood up when the guard called time. Dante reached out. He took her hand. His fingers intertwined with hers naturally, fitting into the spaces between her own as if they had been designed for it. Lily stepped closer. She searched his face, looking for any trace of the dawn. She found only Dante. She rose on her toes. She pressed a kiss to his lips. It was slow. It was lingering. It wasn't a desperate grasp for survival. It was a promise of a future. It tasted of patience and ache. Dante's hands hovered at her waist for a heartbeat, trembling slightly, before he settled them there gently. He held her like she was something fragile and precious, something he was still learning he was allowed to touch. They pulled apart, both slightly breathless. "I will be here," Lily whispered, her voice fierce. "When you get out, I will be waiting." She looked him dead in the eye. "But only if you keep choosing him," she said. "The man from the docks, the man who stepped in front of the bullet, that is the man I love. The rest of it, let it burn." Dante nodded. His gaze was fierce, devoted, anchoring her. "He's the only man left," Dante promised. "He's the only future I want." The guard called again. Lily walked away, toward the gate where Emma was waiting. She stopped at the heavy steel door and looked back once. Dante was standing by the fence. He wasn't looking at the ground. He was looking at her. A small, hopeful smile touched his lips. Their eyes met across the yard. It was a silent vow, a second chance. A love forged in the fire of a warehouse and the rain of a dock. Now fighting for the hardest thing of all, a quiet, honest life. Lily smiled back, turned, and walked out into the light. "Thank you so much for listening to Don't Touch That," the waitress cried. The Mafia boss froze when he saw what she hid. I hope you enjoyed this journey of danger, redemption, and romance. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below telling me which country or city you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed the story, please consider subscribing to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an upload. And do not forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. Did Dante deserve his second chance? I cannot wait to read your opinions. Until next time, stay safe and keep reading.